guess.
Okay, not beginning with the cataracts. The next two lights are just, and if they're right, if my head isn't in the right place, I can't see.
So
Can you turn them off?
you don't have
She's
to.
got it.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Sarva Siddhi Lahum Arima Arinisa Ranzare Azindaram
Good morning. The two prayers we looked at yesterday morning and afternoon were concerned, in the case of the first, with praying to Guru Rinpoche primarily in reference to his deeds. And in the case of the second, praying to him as inseparable from the deities and also from the other great Indian masters who were primarily associated with those respective deities. The prayers that we're going to look at this morning and this afternoon are, well, in a general sense, they're not that different, but they're a little bit different. The one this morning is associated primarily with what we could call the Guru Rinpoche's essence, what he fundamentally is. Not so much from the point of view of an ordinary observer. The idea is that the outer prayer describes him as he might have been perceived by an ordinary observer. Now, it should be clear that the type of ordinary observer who has access to Guru Rinpoche's deeds directly has far more merit than we could even begin to imagine. So we're talking about a universe that is, if I may say so, unfamiliar to us experientially. You know, we're basically at this point, we're scrambling for crumbs, to be honest. times are getting worse. People argue against that. They say that's just a cultural thing. When people say of Dharma, this is a cultural thing, that is a cultural thing, be very skeptical, because it's usually just good old whiteness, good old Eurocentrism masquerading as critical historiological thinking. We're very clever that way. I know, I'm white. I know how it works, folks. Can't fool me. Well, you can, but not about that. So this third prayer, what we call the secret prayer, the prayer to the secret mandala of the Guru, which to those of you who are familiar with it is the mandala in your throat during the 10th day, the feast, is concerned with Guru Rinpoche as he would be perceived by other, we could say, other enlightened beings. So this is the mandala of a form of Guru Rinpoche called Padmavajra. And Padmavajra is in some ways not that different from the Uddiyana Vajradhara that we spoke of yesterday morning with, it looks like Vajradhara, but with Mandala as a consonant. In the Barway Dorje tradition, Padmavajra, however, is seen as a kind of a slightly brownish red, dark red. But Padmavajra is what Guru Rinpoche really is, and then from that manifests in our world through a couple of steps. And I went back and forth during the night as to how much to share with you about this, because I know that too much information is too much information, and too much complexity is too much complexity. It doesn't help. But on the other hand, you do have the white book, so you can refer to it, the clear guidance, and I'll give you the page numbers and that. First of all, Kathy, could you tell us what page we're beginning on in the edition of the liturgy?
We're doing Guru Namo Sarva Siddhi.
I'm assuming.
Making sure I'm on the right spot. If so, 13.
Yes, 13. Okay. So we're on page 13 in the 5-chapter liturgy edition that's on the website. We're on page 61 in the clear guidance, and we'll be referring to pages 32 and 33. 32 this morning and 33 this afternoon, for those of you who want to review. To understand what Padmavajra is, I mean, I'll quote from a major terma of another terma tradition, just because it has more, let's say, more information about Padmavajra. And again, this is a terma of Yungay Mingyur Dorje, Mingyur Rinpoche, most of you have heard of this term. Although Guru Rinpoche appears in this world as, Padmakara, Padmasambhava, and with all the other names, and all the other siddhas of India appear as these individuals who manifest as people, women and men who lived lives and had occupations and pursued Siddhi in their individual ways, they simultaneously exist in a pure reality, and where they are actually already fully awakened beings that manifest pretty much as what we would think of as, you could say, semi-wrathful deities. And the value of our understanding this, which is part of the value, the particular or unique value of this secret prayer, as it's called, or prayer to the secret mandala, is that sometimes when we're given the biographies of great masters, we find them off-putting or intimidating. Lamas will give you the biography of Milarepa or Marpa or Naropa or Yeshe Gyamtso and teach it and say, aren't you inspired by how much they suffered and how much they went through and how hard they had to work? And the idea, and then they're dismayed when Westerners are either not interested, which frankly I've seen from many of you, or actually put off by them because it just sounds too hard. Because in many cases, frankly, let's face it, we come to Buddhism as burnouts, right? We're burnouts. We burnt out on the religion of origin. And if I may say so, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking for something easy, aren't we? We don't really want to work that hard, do we, folks? We want it to be easy. And so when a Tibetan Lama says to us, you know how hard you have to work? Look at how hard Milarepa had to work. Well, you have to work harder because you're not as good as him. He had more merit than you. So however hard he had to work, you have to work twice that hard. You know, or they say, look at how much Naropa suffered. I'm going to make you suffer more than that. You know, or Yeshe Gyamtso giving up her kneecaps, being sexually assaulted at least twice and left for dead, you know, being brutalized by the feudal system of which she was a pawn. That's nothing. You're going to go through worse. And then they wonder, you know, and then they'll give a lecture where they'll say, you know, you don't read these biographies correctly because you were put off by them. You should be inspired. We're not inspired by that in most cases. We're put off. So it's helpful for us to remember that of course those things happened, but that's not all that is going on. That's not all that was going on. And we'll go through this in more detail in future seminars when I go through the whole clear guidance. But basically, the two prayers we're going to deal with today are describe the we could say level of reality that is what else is going on at the same time. So the secret prayer refers to the mandala of Guru Rinpoche in a Sambhogakaya form as Padmavajra, almost like Dharmakaya. Think of it as Guru Rinpoche as Vajradhara. With his Sambhogakayas, so the 5 Buddhas, so you think of it as Guru Rinpoche as the 5 Buddhas. Everybody has the 5 Buddhas. We all have the 5 Buddhas. If you have form, sensations, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, you have the 5 Buddhas within you. So it's not the case that the 5 Buddhas that we normally meditate on are particularly Buddha Shakyamunis, 5 Buddhas. Although, as His Holiness the 17th Karmapa said, we depict them all that way because we're all basing it on the historical Buddha. Well, these are Guru Rinpoche's 5 Buddhas. Each and every one of you has your own set of the 5 Buddhas. So, I mean, you wouldn't imagine them that way. We imagine them in a standardized format, but you can imagine, you know, little Jeff Vairocana, Jeff Ratnasambhava, Jeff Amitabha, and Kathy Amoghasiddhi, Kathy Achobhya, and so on. Each of you has that. So this is Guru Rinpoche's Vajradhara, sort of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya together, and Guru Rinpoche's Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya border. Again, in the Dzogchen teachings, of course, everything is always a little bit more, it's either a little bit more complicated or a lot more simple. In this case, it's a little bit more complicated. There are sort of, let's say, it's not really like this, but it's easier to put it this way. Let's say segues between the kayas. It was what they call a Chinang Truku, or semi-Sambhoga Kaya, Nirmana Kaya, and so on. And we could discuss that, but there isn't time today. So how did this happen? And that's where we have to turn to the background that's in the clear guidance. What we're talking about today, and a little bit yesterday afternoon, but today and especially this afternoon, is how Vajrayana teachings arose in the world during the time, this teaching period of Buddha Shakyamuni. Because Buddha Shakyamuni, while he is or was Vajradhara and Samantabhadra, did not openly teach Vajrayana. I'm going to just read to you bits from this text to explain this. From time to time, the Buddha discreetly taught internal secret mantra to uncommon individuals, such as bodhisattvas of Mahayana family, Vidyadharas among the Devas, Nagas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas, and that we'll come back to that this afternoon. Intelligent kings, queens, and ministers, and members of the Lichavi clan. Now, the Lichavi were the rulers of a city-state, very important to the Indian history at that time. And one of them, Vimalakirti, who we're going to talk about this afternoon, was an important disciple of the Buddha, or significant disciple of the Buddha. Aside from that, the culture, time, and circumstances made common disciples unfit for the teaching of more than external pure behavior. Therefore, it was not possible for the Buddha to actually teach the Dharma of unsurpassable secret mantra. He did, however, make several predictions in his final remarks about the continuation of his activity in the teaching of his ultimate and unsurpassable Dharma. And then he withdrew the array of his body into the Dharmakaya, in Kanishnas of the Buddha, died, passed away. Then, urged by his own wisdom, by his aspirations combining the wisdom of all Dharmakayas, and by the light rays of blessing of Amitabha and the other Sambhogakayas, the Buddha emanated light rays combining into one the compassion and power of all bodhisattvas, such as the lords of the three families, that's Genrezi, Manjushri, and Vajrapani. These light rays became a golden five-pronged Vajra marked by a five-colored tree syllable. The Vajra descended onto a lotus stalk on an island in a milky lake in the southwest. Born from it were the five Guru Tutrengs. Tutreng means a string of skulls, or garland of skulls, who appeared as Sambhogakayas. And that's basically happening in Sukhavati. Simultaneously, in the billion worlds of this realm, Saha, or tolerance, so the billion worlds, we can think of Saha as more or less the Milky Way, a galaxy. Innumerable teachers of Sutra and Mantra turned the holy Dharma chakras. Then the Sambhogakayas, the five Tutrengs, arose above a sun and moon in the center of an Udamvara flower on an island in Lake Danakosha in Uddiyana. So the Guru Rinpoche Sambhogakayas, these five skull strings, we'll call them in English, coalesced and arose as the Nirmanakaya, who's the person. Now, when we think about the kayas of a teacher, it sounds as though there's a Dharmakaya that then somehow descends into a Sambhogakaya, that descends into a Nirmanakaya, as though that when the Nirmanakaya appears, the Sambhogakaya is gone or used up, and when the Sambhogakaya appears, the Dharmakaya is gone. But of course, it's not like that. So what the secret prayer is concerned with is the fact, among other things, is the fact that even while Guru Rinpoche has appeared among us as a Nirmanakaya is Dharmakaya, Padmavajra, and Sambhogakaya, the 5 spell strings or trip strings, are very much there. And he's that as much as he is this historical figure. All right, that's by way of introduction. The prayer begins, Om Guru Namo Sarva Siddhi Om, and then make some statements about reality and the path, and then correlates those with the Dharmakaya of Guru Rinpoche. First statement, all dharmas are beyond limits in the expanse of primordial purity. Dharmas, in this case, refers to all things. Beyond limits means beyond the limitations of any idea or concept we could come up with. Principally ontological concepts such as exists, doesn't exist, and so on. And so there are things as they really are beyond that. All of our ideas about reality are wrong. That's the first statement. And the discovery of how wrong all of our ideas are is the discovery of the ground, which is primordial purity. And if you want to know more about the nature of that ground, then you should read the omniscient Longchenpa's A Treasury of Words and Meanings. Then the second statement is, appearances are penetrated by the breakthrough of thoughts. So this concerns the path. If all of our ideas are wrong, what do we do to get over them? To stop making that mistake? Because it's a recurrent mistake. It's not doomed. It's not like we made that mistake once and we can never correct it. It's a mistake that we keep on making. We keep on reifying everything with our concepts, with our ideas. But concepts and ideas, as people realize, are carried by thought. A concept or an idea is only potentially present until it is a thought. So the way to, on the path to correct that error is by cutting through it constantly. And this is particularly emphasized in the Dzogchen teachings of the Barway Dorje tradition, which I can't obviously go on in detail about in this public setting. Those of you who have received these teachings know what I'm referring to. So appearances are penetrated by the breakthrough of thoughts. You may be thinking, well, thoughts are one thing and appearances are something else. No. Appearances are what you experience. And what you experience is actually what you think you experience. You know, it's how all of our reality is in fact how we think about things. And then finally, the fruition. The expanse and awareness are self-apparent. I said drops then because I was being discreet, but now we can say tilakas, the great perfection. And that refers to the fruition. Again, that's a private instruction. Those of you who've received it will understand, and the rest of you can, at this point, aspire to receive it in the future. I can't. I could, but I'm not going to enlarge upon that. So these are statements about the ground path and fruition of reality. What reality, the things as they are, how to experience things as they are, and what that experience of things as they are, what the realization that that experience of things as they are brings. All of that, if we put all of that together, that is what we call Samatha Vajradhara. Now you may say, well, this isn't two different things. Well, one is abstract statements about reality, and the other one is a person. No, it's the same thing. Abstract statements are just more bullshit. This is not about abstract statements. And person, there's no such thing as a person. As the Buddha said, there are no sentient beings. There's no such thing as life. There's no such thing as existence. There's no such thing as persons. Those are all concepts that we have that are wrong. I can't really say any more about that. I mean, it's like basically you get it or you don't. And if you don't get it, you just have to keep on working until you do. And then you can get it and then stop getting it if you screw up. That's a danger. Very real. So that is Guru Rinpoche's Dharmakaya, Samatha Vajradhara. The equality of existence and peace is great bliss. We talk about great bliss a lot. And it sounds like a conditioned state, as though we have a scale. There's misery and horror, abject horror on the bottom. And then there's less misery, we call minor misery. And then there's neutrality. And then there's feeling okay, which we would call minor bliss. And then there's feeling pretty good, which we would call bliss. And there's feeling great, which is great bliss. That's not what great bliss is. Because it couldn't last. Any conditioned state will not last. That we know. We don't need Buddhism to tell us that. Oh, well, we do, but we should have known it anyway. So what is great bliss? If it's not that, it's the equality of existence and peace. See, the whole problem is we're trying to escape. In nirvana, of course, nirvana is the escape from misery, but it's not really the escape from misery, it's realizing the nature of misery. The whole idea of escape is the problem. We think that it's going to be better over there, wherever over there is. And Buddha's work with us. If you read Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, he talks about this in the first chapter, why Buddhas teach nirvana, conventional nirvana, the state of an arhat, state of cessation to begin with. He says, because basically, most people won't accept the fact that they have to deal with reality. They want nothingness, unconsciousness, escape, some kind of something else, something better. And so, Buddhas in their teaching kind of dangle that in front of us to get us to actually do something. But finally, when we grow up, if we grow up, we have to accept that the only state of the fruition is the equality of samsara and nirvana. The only transcendence is the transcendence of the whole idea of attaining some kind of spiritual state. As one great master who taught in this country famously said, there is no such thing as a spiritual path other than giving up all attempts to attain a special spiritual state. So the equality of existence and peace is great bliss. It is unity because there is no longer any split between subject and object. And that is the glorious protector who pervades all things, arisen in a body of co-emergent, connate, supreme bliss, emptiness. That is Padmavajra. That is what Guru Rinpoche really is. It's tragic that during the Cultural Revolution, the sadhana of Padmavajra, of the Barway Dorje tradition, was lost. Because there was a separate, as we saw yesterday morning, outer, inner, secret, very secret. I mean, what we practice is kind of the, it's called the combined version. So it's doing them all at once. And, but originally these things were practiced separately and in sequence to enable us to mature gradually at our own pace. So if Padmavajra is kind of the segue between Guru Rinpoche's Dharmakaya and Sambhogakaya, then next we have his 5 families. So we could say the Guru Rinpoches of the 5 families, like the Buddhas of the 5 families. And these are not that difficult to understand. The splendor of all the ocean of supreme Siddhi, the jhana sattva of all families and mandalas, in nature the dharmadatta wisdom vairocana, I pray to Buddha Durjitsao, so the skull string of the Buddha family. And in the Barway Dorje tradition, I mean, the way these deities are depicted varies tremendously from system to system. In the Barway Dorje tradition, they look more or less like universal monarchs holding a damaru in their right hands and the scepter of their family in their left, I think. So in the case of the Buddha skull string, he's got a dharma wheel in his left hand, and he's dark red in color. In the case of Vajra's skull string, he's blue and he's got a Vajra in his left hand. In the case of Ratna's skull string, he's yellow and he's got a jewel in his left hand, and so on and so forth. And you can look at it's in the other library, at the refuge Tanka, and see these deities. And there's a key in the clear guidance. There's a key to the refuge assembly. And then the others are pretty much exactly, they are basically the Buddhas of the 5 families. I'm not just going to read through it because you can all read. So it's, pacification, mirror-like wisdom, Akshobhya is Vajra, skull string, enrichment, the wisdom of equality, Ratna Sambhava is Ratna, skull string, attraction, the wisdom of discernment, Amitabha is Padma, skull string, and force or eradication, the wisdom of accomplishment, Amoga Siddhi, is Karma, skull string. Now in the mandala in your throat, it only mentions these 5 figures as surrounding Padmavajra. But when this is practiced as an external, as its own independent mandala, there are other deities as well. Specifically, Guru Rinpoche's root guru, who was not present in the first 2 mandalas, and the Buddha's first disciple. Well, in this case, it's Guru Rinpoche's adoptive father, who was a descendant of the Buddha's first tantric disciple under Buddhi. And then Yeshe Gyamtso and a figure, Nyingchen Payong, who they tend to gloss over for reasons that you'll see, because it has tremendous historical importance on the level of the Da Vinci Code, but anyway, except it's real. Guru Rinpoche had many teachers. And depending upon which of his many teachings is emphasized, it'll always say that was his greatest teacher. So, according to the Kila empowerments, Prabhahasti, from whom he received Kila, or Buddha Jnana, is his greatest teacher. According to the Sri Hiruka, it was Humkara. According to the Yamantika teachings, it was Manjushri Mitra. And according to the Hayagriva teachings, it was Nagarjuna, and so on. But according to the termas of Chokcha Dechen Lingpa, who was Barway Dorje's root guru and a mentor as a Tirtan, it was his principal root guru was Shri Singha. And Shri Singha was a disciple of Manjushri Mitra, from whom Guru Rinpoche received the Dzogchen teachings. So they say that you can have 100 root gurus who are on the bhumis, but whichever one shows you your mind is the root guru. In Guru Rinpoche's case, that was Shri Singha. So the next figure in this mandala is Shri Singha. Now, in the combined sadhana, Shri Singha is in your navel as one of the figure. I think is he? Yeah, I think he's in the navel. Because there are additional, because it's a body mandala, there are additional mandalas incorporating various deities. The wisdom Vajra body of all Buddhas, the supreme teacher appearing as a guru, you became a Mahamudra Vidyadhara. I pray to the feet of Shri Singha. I pray to Padmakara of Dhyana. So just as Manjushri Mitra, Shri Singha's root guru, is now Barway Rinpoche, Shri Singha is now Siddhi Rinpoche. So, if you don't like something about Guru Rinpoche, go to Siddhi Rinpoche and complain because he was his guru. And it is therefore no coincidence that he is the guru of the 17th Jangwon Karmapa. The next figure is Guru Rinpoche's adoptive father, who was called Indrabhuti, which was probably a lineage name like Henry or Elizabeth and so on. And this Indrabhuti was the ruler of Udjana and probably the descendant of, according to some, if Guru Rinpoche was born immediately after the Buddha's parinirvana, according to some, it was the same Indrabhuti who was the Buddha's first human disciple of the higher Vajrayana, to whom the Buddha taught the Samaja Tantra. In any case, it says, the worthy king prophesied by the victor, you served as a father to the miraculously born Nirmanakaya Padmakara. You and your court achieved Buddhahood without remainder. That indicates that it's the Buddha's disciple, because famously the Buddha taught the Samaja Tantra to Indrabhuti in his court, and they all achieved rainbow bodies on the spot and just disappeared. I pray to the feet of Indrabhuti. Okay, then the next deity in this mandala, who in the body mandala of the combined sadhana, of course, she's in the lower abdomen with her attendants, is Yeshe Gyamtso. Ganga Devi, liberated from samsara, took birth through bodhicitta in the house of Kachin. Kachin was the noble house or clan in which Yeshe Gyamtso was born. Through aspiration, you became the victor's consort. The victor here refers to Guru Rinpoche. I pray to the feet of Saraswati Gyamtso. Yeshe Gyamtso is an emanation of Saraswati. And this is not coincidentally, Barway Dorje is the rebirth of two of Guru Rinpoche's disciples, Nupchen Sanji Yeshe and Yeshe Gyamtso. Because Nupchen Sanji Yeshe is or was Manjushri, and Yeshe Tsogyal is Saraswati, and so they're actually not too different. They would appear as people. I mean, they could both be in the room at the same room at the same time, and you see them as two different people, but in essence, they're not two different beings, and that's why they could coalesce and be born, or be reborn as Chechen Dorje. And now we come to an enigmatic reference to a kid. And I won't comment on it because everybody just passes by and they don't want to, nobody seems to want to talk about this in detail. But the son of the Tibetan people, skillfully sired by Ujjayi's wisdom body of rainbow light. In other words, father was Guru Rinpoche, mother was a Tibetan woman. Because you're a son of the people of your mother in the Tibetan understanding. The display of immeasurable compassion as Nirmanakaya, I pray to the feet of Kunzang Palchen. So that's all I know. That's the only place I've seen it mentioned. He's mentioned in a couple of other places in the Barway Dorje tradition, and I'm willing to bet there are mentions of him in the Theramok Chukchu Lingpa. But if you say to most Tibetan Buddhists, Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal had a kid, they'll throw you out. So don't, just do yourself a favor. Just, it's there, you pray to him, just don't ask questions. Otherwise,
Yeshe Tsogyal or something?
I think it was Yeshe Tsogyal. It sounds like it. Because at one point it refers to the father, mother, and son. Given, I think it sounds like it, and I'm sure that, but I'm sure there are. Yeah, the secret mandala is that of the Sambhogakaya Vajradhara, Guru Sri Hiruka Padma Vajra, surrounded by the skull strings, father, mother, and son. I translated it as fathers, mothers, and children because I wanted to give everyone an out. I was still living on the other side of the river, so I was still trying to tread carefully politically. All right. And then we have the pundits and siddhas of India and Tibet who greatly blessed Tibet, the bilingual translators to whose kindness there is understanding, and the kings, ministers, and queens who established the doctrine. I pray to the pundits, translators, the Lord, and the subjects. These are in the body mandala of the combined sadhana. These figures are pretty much all in your behind your navel, the level of the navel. If you look at the liturgy, you'll see you have a mandala that includes Trisong Detsen and his two sons, Siddhi Singha, Guru Rinpoche's guru, in the middle, because he's the wisdom vajra of all Buddhas. The others are body, speech, and mind. And then the wisdom of all Buddhas is Siddhi Singha. And then in front of him, you have Trisong Detsen with the two princes, who are now Mingyur Rinpoche and Choling Rinpoche. On either side of him, then you have what's his name? The Yamantaka. I can't remember anyway. I'm blanking on names. Anyway, the names are there. You can just read the names are there. So, and then all the others, the 25 disciples and whatnot, are all there. And then again, it mentions the gatekeepers and so on. So, I mean, the words, you can read the words. They're pretty clear. The point of this is that, or one point is that along with the what was commonly visible to beings in this world of Guru Rinpoche, he was and is simultaneously in an unchanging pure state as Padma Vajra, including the Buddhas of the 5 families as the 5 skull strings. And they're called skull strings because that's his secret name, Guru Rinpoche's secret name. Everyone gets secret names during empowerments. And his is Pema Dorje, Padma skull string, which is why that's in the longer name mantras and so on. And so that's the basic meaning in a general way of the secret prayer. And then this afternoon, I'll take questions for the last half hour this morning. This afternoon, we'll go through the very secret prayer, which brings us back to history, back to 28 years after the Buddha's parinirvana, and to page 33 in the Clear Guidance, and well, obviously page 64, the liturgy, and 33 for the background. Okay, any questions? If not, we can go on. Because with
so much information, it's still kind of.
Well, that's why I make page references to the Clear Guidance, because then you don't have to remember any of this. It's all in there. Everything I'm telling you is written down in this. And even the explanations will be pretty easy to remember once you hit that part of the text, because it'll remind you. So you don't need to. I am trying to give you background, but I'm not trying to give you a lot of useless facts to remember or minutiae. So who was first?
This is hopefully a simple question. I keep wondering as I chant this, in the Amitabha section, those with the 4 interests and in mind and appearances, what are the 4 interests?
The 4 interests are 4 ways of
Where is that figure?
it's in the Padma Dorje stanza. The 4 interests are, sometimes they call them 4 means of attraction, but the Tibetan is mupa, which means interest, shi. So it's 4 ways of being interesting to people. Being generous with your time and otherwise. Doing what you say you're going to do to the extent you can. Speaking meaningfully, not disconnectedly. And the other one, which I forget, I'll look it up. But that's why they call it the 4 means of attraction, because people, if you want to help people through being a good influence, you've got to get people to listen to what you have to say. And the best way of getting people to listen to you is by being nice. That's why, last night I was reading the autobiography of another Tibetan, different Tibetan, who was, as his autobiography reveals, was a bit on the, we might say a little bit on the grumpy side. And he says, although it says you're supposed to attract disciples with the 4 interests, I've never been able to do so. And I think, it's like, it's basically being nice, being straightforward, being honest, and being kind. And yesterday we talked about the fact that when we attempt to control a teacher, even in terms of their medium, we're obstructing their ability to strategically teach. But on the teacher's side, in spite of that, in spite of the freedom that they have to be allowed, as a matter of practicality, most of the time they have to be nice. I mean, we read these stories about these tough guy teachers, like not all guys, because Nguma was pretty. Naropa's elder sister was also pretty much a tough teacher, it sounds. But they weren't always like that. It's not the case that Marpa walked around in a constant bad mood with beating people up, or that Talopo, just was throwing people off roofs left and right. If you read biographies of Talopa, to everyone except Naropa, he was a sweetheart. Which brings up another point, which is that when teachers are hard asses to someone, you should take it as a compliment. Because that's how it's meant, and it doesn't come across. It's one of those cultural things. I've seen this, like when Lama Trotop teaches and starts, he gets a little macho, right, in the way he talks, and it's almost, you can't handle the truth. That's kind of, and people are intimidated, and I get all the phone calls. I get all the phone calls. I know on those weekends, my phone is going to be buzzing. He doesn't mean it's heard very differently by a Tibetan. A Tibetan hears that kind of hard-ass lecture, and they think, boy, he really has confidence in me. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother. But we don't get that. I mean, because in our culture, unless you're in the military or apparently in medical school, you're not treated that way. And if you are treated that way, it's got a time limit, right? I mean, boot camp in the military and residency for those crazy people over there known as doctors. And then after that, then you're the big cheese and you get to shit on everybody else. But with Dharma, there's no such time limit. It doesn't matter who you are. Your teacher can always turn hard ass on you. But their responsibility is to only do it if you can take it and if you need it. So Talopa was brutal to Naropa, but he was sweet to everybody else. The woman, the prostitute, for whom he worked as a kind of a finder and doer muscle, basically. Talopa worked as a prostitute's muscle. And at one point she realized he floated into the sky or did something, and she realized that he was an enlightened being, and she apologized to him. Now this is the same Talopa who stuck bamboo shoots into under Naropa's fingernails, so we think he'd be. And he said, "Oh, that's fine. You couldn't have known. You didn't do anything wrong." And she'd offered him a flower, an apology, and he put the flower on her head, and she achieved enlightenment on the spot. She didn't need to go through any of the shit that Naropa went through. And he was as sweet as a spring rain to her. And that's the way these guys were mostly. They're not just berserkers wandering around being hard asses. So when teachers get tough with you, take it as a compliment, because that's how it's meant. It means they think that you are capable of great things and therefore require the kind of harrowing experience to which we subject our military and our physicians. Because they're going to protect others. That's the key point. If somebody's practicing for their own benefit alone, like they're going to go into retreat and say, 100 million Omani homes or so on. You don't need to be tough with them. They're going to be tough with themselves. But if someone's going to potentially able to teach others, then there's the danger of their becoming arrogant. In fact, if you teach others, you will become arrogant. You can't help it. And you constantly need to be, what was the expression you used? Taken down a peg. We constantly need to be brought down. You know, sometimes some of us are fortunate enough to be, like in my case, I'm as crazy as a shithouse rat. I mean, I'm really fucking mentally ill, and that takes me down. You know, but for people who don't suffer from mental illness, they need their peers or their own teachers to constantly knock them down. Well, Lama Trotop said that in Chodrak Monastery, which is also closely associated with Ramchola and with the Barway Dorje tradition, they do this to one another. He said that people who are not used to the way the monks of that monastery talk to one another are horrified because they constantly disparage one another. And it's done to cut through arrogance. So the hard ass approach is basically saying to you, when a teacher is like that to you, they're saying to you, I think you might be able to protect other sentient beings from the sufferings of samsara. In order to do that, you're going to need to be, frankly, broken down. And I'm going to do it. And if you're just somebody who is going to, keep your own head above water, so to speak, then they don't need to do that. Yeah. Sure.
Hi, maybe, thank you so much, Lama. Maybe it's just something I have to hear again, and there's part of me understands, or at least, I can't say understand, but at least entertains that whatever it is. It's not a concept, it's a truth or whatever. And another part of me fights it. Say, that can't be so.
Which truth?
And I'm just going to say what it is, which is when you said there are no such things as people.
Oh, yeah.
All those things.
Yeah, well, the Buddha said that. So me, semjin me, sim me. No life, no about such thing as biological life. No sentient beings, no mind. The word for sentient beings is those with mind. So for those with mind to exist, mind has to exist. But if mind does not truly exist, there can't be those with mind. And the biological life is how we talk now about artificial intelligence, which would be a self-aware entity that is not biologically alive, right? And I think at some point we're going to have to come to face the fact that biological life is an arbitrary distinction. Of course it has scientific validity. We can talk about how we emerged from the pre-bacteria stage and evolved and so on. At a certain point, consciousness, which is always a dormant possibility, became a practical possibility on this planet because there were entities that were chemically complex enough to support it. But that's looking at it from a Dzogchen point of view. But anyway, ultimately, I think that these are useful distinctions that only are of relative validity. And as for saying that there are no beings, there are no, obviously there seem to be, but it's not that you don't exist and I don't exist. It's just, what are you? You're a body and a mind. And you think of you as me, but I don't think of you as me. I think of you as you. If you were really me, I would think of you as me, and I don't. And if you were really you, the way I think of you, you would think of you as you, and you don't. It's all just relative. It's like, you know,
Okay.
is New York City south or north from here? Well, it's south from here. Is it now north or south from Alabama? It's north. Good way north.
So
Sure.
it's-
You know, and it's fine to talk about north and south and east and west while we're on the surface of this planet, but once you get off the surface of this planet, that has no meaning.
I understand. I think I understand. I can see that. Then how is it that we can relate to these great beings, you know, like Buddha? I mean, I see Buddha as Buddha.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean how can we, or how do we?
Yeah, how, well,
The same
I
thing?
guess,
Well, the reason we relate to Buddha is because we are Buddha. There's, you know, relatively speaking, again, on the level of there being north and west and south and east, you are a person, and the Buddha or Guru Rinpoche or Barway Dorje, whomever, anybody, is a person, and you're different people. And we have to say in relative truth that you are different people, because if you weren't different people, then when Buddha Shakyamuni achieved Buddhahood, you would have achieved Buddhahood, and you didn't, apparently. I mean, you claim you didn't. You might have. I wouldn't know. But on the other hand, that's just how things seem.
I see.
In reality, you're not two different people. Well, if you then ask, are we then the same people? Are we all one? No. That's why we say, in absolute truth, not one, not two. In relative truth, you know, each of us has our own separate mind and our own separate problems, our own separate set of the five Buddhas, but on our own separate distortions of them into the five kleshas. Our own separate set of the five female Buddhas, but unfortunately our own separate distortion of them into the five attributes, we could say, or states of matter, five elements. But the distinction, the only thing that's actually separating us is the walls created by our kleshas and our obscurations. So, for example, the space outside that window and the space inside the window we can distinguish between them because of the window. But if the window was smashed, if there was no glass or screen in between them, the distinction, aside from based on the architecture of the room, would be irrelevant. If you therefore say, does that mean that we're all one? No. Because the concept of oneness only has value, only has meaning, if there is something against which to oppose it. If everything is indivisible, there's no such thing as oneness. Because there's nothing else. So not one, not two.
So this is something like the relative truth and the absolute.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But remember that absolute truth is nothing other than the way things are. And relative truth is nothing other than the way things seem. So therefore, relative truth is ultimately, relative truth is individual.
But it's
Somewhat.
very important to.
It's okay. Just talk.
It's it's very important to discover all the relative truth, like the kleshas and we think that we're the self-centeredness. That it's important for each of us to work on it so that we can eventually see the ultimate truth.
Well, we have to have two things happening at the same time. Guru Rinpoche said you have to descend with the view while ascending with the behavior, conduct.
Yeah.
Descending with the view means that you're taking an aerial view. You're looking at the whole big picture. But at the same time, you have to climb up step by step. You have to walk up step by step. So therefore, while, ultimately I guess the easiest way to put it is that because everything is empty, everything matters. The mistake that people make with Buddhism, or one of the many mistakes that we make, is thinking that emptiness means nothing matters. It means the opposite.
Okay.
Because things are empty, everything matters.
Thank you so much.
I have an online question. Is the Clear Guidance book a restricted book for the Dzogchen students?
No, it's by Rinpoche made it publicly available and published it about 20 years ago. So there should be copies in the bookstore, and I know that KPL retains the PDF file. So if there are no copies, there's some way to make it. Because when I teach the rest of it during future seminars, people will need the book to follow. So yeah, it's not restricted.
It's a Nundra book.
Which?
It's sold with the Nundra pack, so there's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Can you please go over the net of magical illusion and how to visualize this?
Well, you visualize the deities as described in each specific practice. So the practice that we do that is most closely associated with the, usually when you say Maya Jala, the web of magical illusion, you're referring to the Guya Garbha Tantra and therefore the peaceful and wrathful deities. So this would primarily be the practice for us, the practice of secret essence, Vajrasattva. So what we practice when we do secret essence Vajrasattva is the net or web of magical illusion. But that's the Vajrasattva web of magical illusion, Dorsam Jutodrawa. There's also the Manjushri, the Jampa Jutodrawa. So for example, the Tantras, the declaration of the names of Manjushri Tantra, which is one of the most commonly recited and considered most significant tantras, is in fact, although it's 50 pages long in Tibetan, is one chapter from a longer tantra that's called the Net of Magical Illusion of Manjushri. And then there's also the Vairochana Net of Magical Illusion and so on. In fact, in the Nyingma tradition, we talk about 8 classes of the Net of Magical Illusion that are not the same as, but are easy to mix up with the 8 Nopikas of whom we spoke yesterday. So in terms of the idea, it's the idea of pure reality, the pure reality of, we could say, the wisdom reality of the deities. That's the easiest way to put it. And how to visualize it is, that's what we do anytime we practice the generation stage. And so you would follow the particular description given in the liturgy you're using.
Hi.
Hi.
I would like to go back to the tough love, hardcore.
Sure you would.
Right. Because I'm one of the receivers and one of the phone callers.
Well, I've actually never fielded a call from you after those days, directly after those days. But
No, I came to your house with.
oh yeah, but that
was.
yeah, that was yeah. Yeah.
So I've struggled with this.
Yeah.
And
So have we all.
Right. Because I tend to be, and being a writing instructor, I've been known to dish it out, so I should be able to take it a little better.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way,
It
does
doesn't
it?
really,
Yeah.
though. And I think it's because I got so much as a kid.
Yeah.
I got beat up.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically. I'm getting choked up.
Mhm.
I mean, it was bad.
Yeah.
And when that comes at me now,
Yeah.
and it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
The highway's looking pretty good.
Oh yeah. I hear you. I hear you, and I could raise you. I mean, I
It
think
is for gamblers.
most of us.
What's it?
Yeah.
And it's only my intense
Mm-hmm.
love and devotion for my guru
Mm-hmm.
that I haven't hit the highway.
Yeah. I know.
So that being said, I'm here for good because that intensity and that
Mhm.
devotion is
Mhm.
a lot of what keeps me centered and sane.
Mhm.
But then likewise, there's so much that we are told or suggested to do on a daily basis.
Uh-huh.
And this curriculum that if you read the early commentaries,
Yeah.
you do 100,000 of these, and then you do 100,000 of these, and then you do all the Nudra, then you do all the Guru Rinpoche
Mm-hmm.
accumulations, and
Mhm.
then you can start on the deities.
Mhm.
And if, when Rinpoche was here,
Mm-hmm.
he would tailor it
Mm-hmm.
and give us
Mm-hmm.
a more personalized agenda.
Absolutely.
He's not physically here anymore to
Mhm.
do that. And so I, for one, feel inundated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way I can do all of the things that I have been strongly suggested.
And then they'll say it's just a suggestion.
Right. While they're slamming the table and
Yeah, right.
and told to ride the bike uphill both ways in the snow.
This
but
is
you
a
get my point.
this is a very important question, and thank you for asking it, because I think that most of us have, in one way or another, come up against this issue. There are a couple of issues here, and separating them may be part of the solution. The first thing is that just as most of us are burnouts, spiritual burnouts or religious burnouts, most or all of us have some form of complex PTSD who come here. And I think it's always been that way. If you read the book Buddha's Lions, the lives of the 84 Mahasiddhas, it's in the Tanjur. It's an Indian book that was translated into Tibetan and then into English. The whole point of that book, I think, collectively, and each Siddha's story is distinct, is that they all had some form of, in some cases, really severe PTSD. And we wouldn't have looked twice. I mean, we can talk about karmic precedents and the fact that we were destined to find the teachings and so on and so forth. And that's valid. That's not delusional to say that. Guru Rinpoche said himself in a terma of a different text called The Embodiment of the Three Jewels. Anyone who is interested in practicing my terma can accept my guarantee, he said, that they met me in person, because otherwise they would have no interest. He said, therefore, regardless of how at fault you find yourself, remember that you are destined, because without that karmic connection with me, you would never practice my teachings. Therefore, they're going to work for you. And he wrote that in the introduction to the embodiment of the three jewels to point out that we always think, oh, yeah, it could work, but not for me. I'm not good enough. We always think, I'm not good enough. And his whole point is, yes, you are. If you're reading this, you're good enough. If you're hearing this, you're good enough. And, but we come to this in part because we're in pain and desperate. And that's very different, frankly, from those of a culture where everybody is Buddhist. Because if you grow up in a culture where everybody's Buddhist, then your motivation is automatically suspect. Just as your motivation for going to church or shul could be suspect. It could be social, could be just because your parents told you to, could be because you want to schmooze and meet, business opportunities. If it's an Episcopalian church, it could be because you like whiskey. Sorry. All right, actually, I have a friend who's an Episcopalian priest who specifically asked me to stop making those jokes, so I'm not going to. If you're just going with the flow, it's very reasonable to question your motivation. We are not going with the flow. Everyone in this room has gone to a great deal of effort, not just today, but over the course of many, many years to be here. This is not the church next door. This is not, there's no political advantage to being here. You are not making business connections. You are not cementing your role in American society by being here. So you chose to be here, and that fact deserves respect. So I think that maybe sometimes that's one of the things that doesn't necessarily come through, if I can put it delicately. The other issue is that there's always been a strong tradition, and this is conscious. This is not an unconscious slippage. This is a conscious hermeneutical decision to present things in public in a standardized way to prevent slippage or laxity, and then in private to tailor things to individual needs. And this used to come up when people would make the mistake of asking a question of let's say a major teacher. With Barway Dorje, it wasn't so much of a problem because he would actually understand, because he really got us in a way that frankly almost none of the others do, if I may say so. Well, I did. He really got us, and he got us for one reason. He had daughters. He had American children. As I said to two of them the other day, I said, you brought your father up as much as he brought you up. And that made him a better teacher. So he didn't do this, but most teachers, especially those who don't actually live here but visit, will answer a question asked in public based on the lowest common denominator rule. So their attitude is, I'm going to answer this in a way that will pose the least danger to those, not the person answering the question, but those who might hear it and misquote it, and so on. So if you ask the question, must I begin with the preliminary practices? In public, they're going to say, yes, everyone has begun with the preliminary practices. But if you ask Lama Tratok that in private, and I've seen people do this, they'll say it's totally individual. All of this is individual. And as you know, the Joan Karmapa, the 17th Joan Karmapa, teaching in New York City in 2008, when he was still, when he spoke very freely, put it this way. And one point was asked by a crowd of, it was the Sanghas that had worked on the visit. So it was semi-public, but it was in the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is pretty public. And somebody asked him about this notion of the path having to be step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And he said, well, you have to understand that each of these systems is one of infinite potential instruction systems that are equally valid. And they work, but none of these individual systems of instruction is indispensable. And then the person who was asking the question pushed the point, which was a good thing because it got him to be more clear. I said, but what about tradition? And he answered first in Tibetan, and then he knew that I would be blamed for it, which of course I have been since then. You want to get in trouble? Translate for the Karmapa when he wants to say something that the old boys club doesn't like. Because I'll blame you. Push comes to shove. It's but he said first in Tibetan, and then he realized it was going to come back on me, so then he repeated in English, Dharma has no tradition. Now, if you simply took that statement out of context and read it to a Lama, they'd show you the door. But the Karmapa said it, so we're allowed to say it. So there is an understanding that you're not supposed to accept the public statements as your private prescription. So it's a little bit like the difference between over-the-counter medicine and prescription medicine. So Barway Dorje, who, as I say, really got us, and was not conventionally trained. Don't forget that his training was not the standard tulku mill, And that's why he had none of the colossal arrogance that almost all tulkus have. Oh, that's going to come back on me. None of the monumental, colossal arrogance that they have, because he was a servant. He served his guru, the 16th Dhamma Karmapa. Well, first of all, he went through hell as a child, and you can read about that. But then the Karmapa, who took care of him, he served him. And he was educated, and he was trained, and he practiced, and so on. But basically what Rinpoche was working with, what he gave us came from the wisdom that he had cultivated in previous lives, tempered by the magnificent experience he had of not being a big deal, in spite of being a big deal. And that made him uniquely able to think out of the box. When a teacher is a product of an institution, such as the 3-year retreat institution in which I was trained, and in the case of someone like Lama Chöto, both the 3-year retreat institution of Rockville and his grandfather's apprentice, really, he was his grandfather's Dharma apprentice, really trained by him personally, one-on-one. When we're trained, we can only reflect the training we've had, and so you can't ask anyone other than Bardo Rinpoche to be Bardo Rinpoche, because they're not going to be Bardo Rinpoche, because we're not capable of it. That's why we have Bardo Rinpoche. That's why we want him back. And no one's trying to replace him. No one could, and no one would dare. So, but there is an understanding, even on the part of those of us who have been, who are rank and file, what I would call rank and file lamas, that there's a distinction between the standardized path and what each and every individual needs. Because each person is an individual and they require different training. And we saw yesterday when we were looking at all these different deities, the reason we had these different deities is because of this. I mean, it's to force everyone in a community to do exactly the same practices. It doesn't work. It's never worked, and it's never been done. That's why we have these huge cumbersome collections that take 6 months to transmit. In that sense, we are, to quote one of you, not Zen. There is no absolute standardization. Dzogchen is standard because it's just who you really are. And that's not something that is, who and what you really are is not something that can be fabricated. Therefore, it doesn't have to be tailored. But in terms of imagery, technique, anything that requires technique, that has to be tailored. That can't be off the rack.
Thank you for all of this.
And then before you go on, there's another thing we have to be aware of, is that the way we ask lamas questions often will elicit a certain answer. And I think that Lama Chöto is becoming more aware of this, let it put this way. It's something that all of the lamas I've translated for have learned at one point or another. The third Jamgon Rinpoche learned it quite early in his 30s. And I'm sure His Holiness and many others, they all learn it eventually. If I go to a lama and say, should I do such and such? And they'll say, well, that's good. It's good to do such and such. I may mishear that as Lama so-and-so telling me to do such and such. But the images came from me, and they're hearing that as, if I go to Lama X and say, can I practice such and such? They hear that as, I really want to practice such and such. Because I'm taking the trouble to bring it up. So we have to be careful with how we sometimes produce answers or tip the scale unwittingly. Sorry, go on.
I'm thinking maybe I should ask this part B during lunch, because I don't want to stir the pot.
Oh, come on, Kathy, it's you. Well, okay, it's 12:12, and we're starting again at 2. I would encourage you to ask this, unless it involves, the character assault of persons. If it's because what you're talking about is procedure,
Mhm.
teaching and practice procedure, which is of general interest, I think. So, can you ask it this afternoon during the Q&A, because it's it's probably good.
Yeah, it is good, and yes, I don't have to run away today. Yesterday I had to run away right in, and today I don't
Well,
have
the
the time.
lawnmower thing. And,
Well, that was at lunchtime, I had
Yeah.
a different thing at this time, but today I don't have any
okay, good.
things, but this.
Well, on that happy note, let's end for this morning with the short dedication on page 7 of this book, opening and closing parts. Sunam diye tamche zikwa tomne nyebe ranam pamje chega ache bala truba sibe sole roba. Thank you. Bon appetit. Are we going out? Are we eating here? Or is it indefinite?
I have no clue.
There's no arrangement. Okay, so.
I'm abdicating.
There will be, I did bring things for a cook. Yesterday, I brought, vegetables and stuff,
Oh, okay.
but since there has not been any cook, after you come back from eating or doing, you can come, we'd love to offer, a cabbage to somebody, some beets, some carrots, because they will all they won't last.
Oh, okay.
And so
Then
people
I'll
can
have to throw them
benefit
away.
from
That'd be lovely.
that offer somehow.